This video is week 2 of my 2-week challenge between iOS using an iPhone 6 Plus and Android using a Google Nexus 6. If you missed my last video, I went into some pretty detailed information of these two operating systems, comparing them, comparing the phones, and I made a separate video comparing the apps that I use between these two operating systems. In this video, I'm going to continue to do a few more differences that I've noticed in these operating systems over this past week, and then I'm going to wrap it up by giving you my thoughts on the phones, the operating systems, and then let you know which phone I've decided to go with. Battery life on these two phones, as I mentioned in my first video, is not great. I actually get a little bit better battery life out of the Nexus. Most videos or reviews that I've seen say that the iPhone 6 Plus gets a little bit more battery life than the Nexus, but I have noticed actually the opposite. The Nexus 6 will usually get me, if I have a pretty heavy use, up until the end of the day, maybe 6 o'clock, if I'm using it on and off all day. I've noticed the iPhone 6 Plus actually ends an hour or so before that, so that's pretty interesting. Now, as far as charge time, the Nexus 6 will charge up in about an hour and 55 minutes from really low, maybe 8%, up to full. The iPhone 6 Plus, with the stock charger that it comes with, takes about 3 hours and 40 minutes to charge up. Now, what's interesting is you can actually use a 2.1 amp charger that comes with an iPad and really boost up. I did not charge it up with this and time it, but I would say it cuts the charging time in half, so it gets it more with the fast charging that the Nexus 6 has. And so that's something that I find pretty interesting, because Apple doesn't really promote that, but the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus does support a faster charging with the 2.1 amp charger as opposed to the 1 amp charger that comes with the phones. I'm wondering why Apple did that. Maybe it's just they didn't want to pony up the extra expense to include a better charger with the phone. But take that to note. If you want to charge your iPhones faster, you can use a different charger. Notifications is something that still frustrates me on iOS, and I really hope Apple one day will fix that. So let me give an example here of a lock screen notification that's really useful. So this is a stopwatch that I'm going to do on both devices. So hit start. If I lock the phones and I press the power button, you'll see here on the Android device that I've got an on-screen notification showing me that the stopwatch is running. If I do that on iOS, I get nothing. There's nothing that tells me that the stopwatch is running. So that's an example of a notification that I really miss on the iOS device. The notification icons that you get on Android are really useful. So you'll see them up here at the top. I've got some Strava notifications. Let me know I've got some messages there. You'll see my stopwatch running. So on the iOS device, I've got the stopwatch still running on both. I don't know that it's running on the iOS device. On the Android, I can look up here and see the icon. Now, let me give kind of a real-world example of how important these icons are for me. And that is, if let's say you get an email that comes in, you got the phone open, the email comes in, but for some reason you missed the notification. Now on both devices, you'll get a notification that comes in up here at the top. The iOS, you can actually set it to either come in the middle or at the top, or not at all. But let's say you have it to come in on both, but you miss it because you maybe had looked away or something. You'll still see the icon at the top. The only way on the iOS that you know if you got a message is you have to pull down here and see that you got an email. So again, the notification icons on Android to me are just really valuable. Both Android and iOS come with their health apps. It's Google Fit on Android and Apple Health on iOS. I like Google Fit a little bit better, and I have not gotten Strava to sync up with Apple Health. Even though I've gone through all the settings that I need to, it's still, if you look here, I did a ride today and it doesn't have any data for the Apple Health, and on Google Fit, Strava did sync up. So these aren't apps I use a whole lot, but they both work okay. Again, I actually prefer Google Fit. I think it's a little bit more intuitive and easy to use. One thing that I have noticed with the Chrome browser in Android that's really nice that I really miss on iOS, and that is that you can actually adjust the font size, and I have not found any way on the iOS device to do it. But you come in here and you go to your settings and you go to accessibility, you can adjust the scaling up here at the top of the text. And I got to some websites on the iOS Chrome browser and the text was too small for my liking, and I could not find any way to adjust the text size, which, you know, to me was kind of important because I use my phone a lot for just sitting around and browsing websites and reading, and it's really nice to be able to adjust the text size. So that's a plus for the Chrome browser. Other than that, the Chrome browsers I think work the same on both. One of the only apps made by Google that you cannot get on iOS is Google Keep, which is a kind of a note app that's really handy, and right now you can't get it. I did start using Todoist, which is a really neat app that I discovered that's cross-platform, and I try to only use apps that are on both platforms in case I get phones and tablets that are iOS or Android down the road. I really want to have an app that I can use on both, so I started using Todoist, but Google Keep right now is not available on iOS. Hopefully in the future that will change and iOS version will come out. One interesting thing that I've noticed is that if I go online to my Google Calendar on a PC and I put in an event, there are times I won't get a notification on the iPhone, and I think that's because I may have had the calendar app closed. So you actually have to go in and remember to keep that Google Calendar app open, and you know, it's a little quirky, so I found that kind of interesting. Another thing, speaking of calendars, is I use an Exchange calendar for work, and if I go into an Android device on the calendar and open up an event that I've been invited to, so you get a calendar invitation, if I accept it on my Android calendar, it won't show up as accepting it for the person who sent that Exchange invite. So if you use Exchange, that's one thing to take note of. Now, if you go into the iOS stock calendar and you see that Exchange invite, you can click accept, and that person will get the notification that you accepted the meeting. So again, if you use Exchange, take that into consideration. In my first video, I talked about the camera performance, and actually let me just say that the camera performance on the Nexus 6 isn't as bad as I originally made it sound in that video that I made last. In low light situations, yes, the iPhone camera is much better than the Android camera. But in bright light, when I did my comparisons, I would say most shots in bright light, the iPhone camera was a tad better. There were actually some shots that I felt the Nexus 6 camera was better than the shot taken on the iPhone. So in bright light, it's usually a pretty close call. Indoors, I had some few shots where the Nexus 6 was better than the iPhone, but the iPhone camera is a more consistent camera, but it doesn't blow away the Nexus 6 camera. And there's actually some tests or comparisons that people did with these phones and things you can read about or watching videos where people actually preferred the photos taken on the Nexus 6. But for me, in my comparisons, I would give the slight edge to the iPhone 6 Plus. Indoors, absolutely the iPhone 6 Plus. So let me throw in some camera samples real quick. I've just got 3 different shots. Here's a low light shot with some natural light coming in from a glass sliding door. The Nexus 6 here, you can see, just is demolished by the iPhone in this really low light, and it was very low light, but the iPhone 6 picked it up really well. This outdoor shot, it's hard to pick a winner between the two. This shot looks great on the iPhone 6 Plus, and this one coming up here on the Nexus 6 looks really good too. I think the tones are a little bit warmer in this one. I think it actually used HDR on the Nexus 6. And this final shot here with the iPhone 6 Plus looks great. Some really good detail in the grass there. You'll see on the Nexus 6 again, the tones are a little bit warmer. The greens look better. So one thing I do like about the iPhone 6 Plus is it'll shoot an HDR photo and regular, and you can pick which one you like, whereas the Nexus 6 you've got to pick before you shoot the photo. I have not had to use iTunes at all on my iOS device, and if I kept the iOS device, I would probably never hook it up to the computer. I believe in doing everything online in the cloud, and I love Google Play Music, and this is the app shown on both phones. You can see it's about the same. On the iOS you've got the little circles instead of squares, and you can see more of the artists or album photos on the Android device. But one thing that I like about the iOS app is that you've got letters on the side, whereas you would just use a slider. So if you wanted to kind of jump down here, you'd kind of slide and you could see what letter you're going to. On the iOS app, you can just say, if we're going to go to S, you can just find the S and tap on that. And so I actually prefer that on the iOS device. Most of the Google apps do have about the same functionality on both. Every once in a while you'll see something that's different, and this is very interesting to me, and that is that comments on YouTube can be sorted by newest first, which you can do online in YouTube. And for someone who puts videos out there, I really need to see my newest comments first, and that's always bothered me about Android. So I find that very interesting that on iOS you can do that. And let me also say that on iOS, it seems that graphics are a little bit more prominent on different websites and things like that. So iOS is just a little bit more graphical as far as animations and things like that. So let me give an example here, and that is in Google Now. So let me go to Google Now on both. If I were to swipe away a card, and this is really minor, but you can see on iOS the card kind of just rolls off to the side, whereas if you swipe away a card on Android, it just kind of moves out of the way. So I've just noticed a few kind of graphical things between the two. I have noticed that on the iPhone, it interacts a little bit better with video and audio. For example, I have a Bible app that I use, and I listen to it sometimes, and when I'm using the audio on the iPhone, I get a little slider that tells me how much is left with what I'm listening to, and it's really easy to play and pause and skip. Now on the Android device, I only get a little card down here, and I can swipe and I can do a play pause. But what I've also really noticed is how the buttons on Bluetooth headphones work better with a lot of different apps. Like this one, I can play and pause and skip with the with the Apple headphones and also Bluetooth headphones, and I cannot do that on Android. A real quick note about the keyboard. I said in my first video that there was no period or comma on the stock iOS keyboard, which is true, but you can, as someone pointed out to me, double tap the space bar and it'll put a period, and that does the same thing actually also on the Android. So that is something that is pretty handy. If you put a lot of periods and things like I do. Now, the stock keyboard on iOS, what I don't like about it is if you go to capital letters, the letters don't change. So right now I'm in capital letters with the caps lock thing over here white instead of gray, and so the letters don't change like they do on the Android keyboard, and I really like that. So if I change these to lowercase letters, you'll see that the letters on the keyboard change. So I totally prefer the Android keyboard over the iOS keyboard. So let me wrap up this 2-week challenge by giving you some thoughts that I have on these two operating systems. First, when talking about smartphones, there are 3 main reasons we use smartphones: information, communication, and entertainment. Both of these phones and operating systems do those 3 things, but how they go about that is a little bit different. Apple really focuses on hardware and integrating the software with the hardware, and I think that really pays off in the way the phone functions. With Google is more of a software company, and they focus more on advancing their software and then getting that out to different vendors who actually manufacture the hardware. And that's where some of the problems that I've noticed with the smartphones. I've had issues over the years with Android having to restart the phones or things like that. What really got me interested in iOS is the fact that my wife has not reset her phone probably in a year. She has an iPhone 5S. So to me, that tells me that Apple's strategy of focusing on the integration between hardware and software really pays off. I've had a few issues with my Nexus 6 since I've got it. The main one is it will restart randomly, and it's been happening maybe once or twice a week. This is actually my second Nexus 6. I did send the first one back to AT&T and they sent me another one. After I had this for a couple weeks, it started doing the same thing. Not quite as frequently, but it's still annoying. Another issue that I've had with the Nexus 6 is when I make a call, the call just won't go through. It won't even make a sound, a ringing sound or anything. And I have to actually restart the phone to do that. I've never had a problem with the iPhone with that kind of issue. But the thing that I really like about Google is the software. The Android software, to me, is just a better experience than iOS. The thing that concerns me about Apple and iOS is the fact that iOS doesn't seem to advance quite as fast as the Google software. Now, Apple has made some really big improvements in iOS 8, and they brought some features that they really needed. But my main problem with iOS is threefold. It's the notifications. I think Android really has them beat with the way the notifications work, lock screen notifications, that kind of thing. The other thing is the home screen management. Just organizing your home screen on an Android phone is just a much better experience. It's more efficient. It's to me just a little bit more intuitive, able to put widgets on the screen and able to move the icons around. The final thing is multitasking. And multitasking really comes into play when you're using, for example, YouTube. I think I mentioned in my last video that with YouTube, I'm able to play a video on my Android phone and go into another app and still listen to that video, and which really helps when you're watching videos that don't really require a lot of watching. It's more of listening to what the person's saying, and being able to multitask that way. Some other things, like when I go into my Gmail app on iOS, and I go out, do something else, I come back into it, it has to reopen the app. It only takes a few seconds, but that really shows how the multitasking on iOS it's not really true multitasking. Unfortunately, you can listen to music and use other apps. But so those are the three things about iOS that really keep me from being as efficient with the software. Let me talk about the advantages that I've noticed over the past 2 weeks of using these phones and operating systems. And I'll start with the iPhone. First, the hardware. I really love the hardware of Apple. The fit and finish of the phones is just top quality. The camera on the iPhone, I think Apple has just done a phenomenal job. It's not the most feature-rich camera, but everything that you need to cover the basics is there. The slow-mo video, you've got auto exposure lock that you can use on the phones, which is really good. So just a lot of things about the camera. The fingerprint scanner on the iPhone is not just a gimmick. It works great, especially when logging into certain apps like password apps and things like that. And then I really like the 3-button remotes for headphones. It's something that I used quite a bit, and especially when the phone's in your pocket, it makes it really convenient if you're using corded headphones with that 3-button remote, which I wish Android would have done. Ever since I've had an Android phone, I've missed that feature. And then I really like the lightning charger. I mean, it's kind of a small thing, but it just shows Apple's commitment to quality and hardware. That thing just pops in there really firm, and it's multi-directional. You don't have to worry about it. So hardware, I think, is the main advantage for Apple. Another thing that I really like about Apple is how there are no carrier restrictions on the phones. If you've used Android phones and you buy it through a carrier, Verizon, AT&T, then you're going to usually get bloatware. It's not near as bad. In fact, I don't think I had any bloatware on the Nexus 6. But the updates for Apple come out immediately. Even with the Nexus 6 on AT&T, the 5.1 update hasn't even come out for this phone yet, and it's already been released a few weeks ago. So I really like how Apple doesn't have carrier restrictions and releases their updates right away. So those are some of the main advantages of Apple. And let me also say is I think that the way that Apple controls the hardware and software, I know a lot of people talk about Apple being locked down. Yes, it's an issue. You lose some functionality, but they've really gotten their hardware and software to work together. One thing that's really cool about iOS devices is how you can take advantage of both Apple and Google. And you can't do this on Android. And an example of that is AirPlay and Chromecast. So I have both of those at work, and when I'm playing a song, I can see the little icon on my screen that shows where I can actually do a Chromecast or I can use Apple AirPlay. And that is a really cool thing that you can take advantages of both. Another example is FaceTime and Hangouts. So you can do Hangout messages, Hangout videos, or you can do FaceTime and iMessage. So you can do both on an iPhone. Those are my advantages for Apple and the iPhone. Now let me talk about the advantages that I've noticed with Android. I've mentioned it several times, and that's notifications. I won't go into that more. I've already done that. Organizations of the screen, again, organizing the home screen. The look and feel of the software, I actually prefer Material Design over Apple iOS. iOS has a really clean, polished look. It's a little sterile, I think, is the way I would describe it. And it looks good, it's a matter of preference, but I actually prefer Material Design. That's going to come down to the user. The back button, that's something that you use all the time on an Android device. You just come to rely on the back button, and that's something that I wish was on an iPhone. I really like the stock keyboards of Androids, being able to swipe and do talk and text with an Android keyboard. I mentioned in my earlier video that even though you can download a third-party keyboard right now for Apple, you can do swipe, but you lose the microphone, so you can't do voice to text with those keyboards. I think that'll change in the future, but right now you can't. I like Smart Lock on Android. Being able to let it know if you're at a certain location, home or work, to have it unlock. The fingerprint scanner does work, and there are times when that's preferred, but Smart Lock, if it's attached to a Bluetooth device, you can define that device as a trusted device in Android, and it's quicker than using the fingerprint scanner. The Google Now integration in the Android phones is just a little bit cleaner, a little bit simpler. You do have Google Now on the iOS software, but it's just a little clunky. It's just not as easy to use, and you don't get as many cards and information that I've noticed on iOS. And I also mentioned the progressive software development. Right now, I think Google is just a little bit more progressive. I've noticed more frequent app updates, that kind of thing. I just feel like I can be more productive on an Android phone, moving around, especially with the notifications, the multitasking. So for me, productivity is an advantage for Android. So those are my main disadvantages or advantages of each phone and software that I've noticed over these past 2 weeks. So which phone have I decided to go with between the iPhone and the Nexus? This has been a much harder decision than I thought it would be. I thought after these 2 weeks I would clearly know what phone to go with. That is not the case. I have thought about this. I've almost lost sleep over it, trying to decide which one is going to be my daily driver. Right now, I've decided that I am going to stick with the Nexus 6. And even though I've had frustrations with the phone restarting, I love the Android software. Right now, I'm not ready to move away from Android software. So I'm going to return my iPhone 6 Plus back to AT&T, pay my $35 restocking fee, and the way I think about this is if a few months down the road, the few apps that I use aren't available, I'm still having problems with the phone, and if I just say I miss that iPhone 6 Plus, then I will go right back to the AT&T store, pick up an iPhone 6 Plus, and go on without looking back. So thanks for watching this video, and if you've missed my other videos, again, really detailed information if you want to really understand some of the intricacies of the differences between these phones and operating systems. Go back and watch those. Thanks for watching.